Ukraine has pivoted its strategy once again and is now focusing on disrupting Russian munitions. But just what exactly does disrupting logistics do, and how are they doing it while preserving their combat power? Leaked footage from the front gives us insight into how drones are being used to take out Russian supply depots. Let's take a look, and we're going to break down just how this fits into the larger Ukrainian strategy. Let's watch. So first off, we've got what is a very simple version of any combat mission, and it starts with reconnaissance. And you can see here, this is a drone identifying that this series of blocks is used as a Russian depot. Now, it may not look like much, but you can infer that there is some sort of munition or supply or repair happening here, because look, the drone probably observes these fresh tracks of vehicles leading to and from these individual bays. And you can see Russian forces are pretty good, right? There's no obvious signs that this is a repair depot. It looks like a very routine old agricultural warehouse of some sorts. Parts of the roof aren't even repaired. So to me, it says that the Russians are getting smarter. They understand that they are always being observed from above, and they are becoming more disciplined in their ability to camouflage their operations. But again, you can't hide things like tracked vehicle movements, and likely continuous observation by drones may have even observed the vehicles actually entering and leaving the facility. Right. So now we switch to what looks like the either a thermal or even the drone operation operating at night. So this is probably a separate drone mission, right? So you probably had a reconnaissance drone, and now you've got a combat drone that is going to be delivering the munitions onto the target. And watch this. We have one. Right, we have one small munition that hits the roof, that opens it up, then a second munition from the drone moments later. Right, this is functioning as sort of a penetration, as often how a javelin operates, where it initially penetrates the armor and then a separate projectile breaks through inside of it, right, creating an opening and then deploying munitions through it. This is what they're doing here, and you can see this is unusual. This is an evolution in combat drones. We actually haven't seen very much of drones capable of carrying multiple explosives, but here we do see that. And you can see there's a third, again, that's trying to get through this hole that's been built in the roof. And you can just see that this is very effective this is a very, very combat capable drone with a very large payload by drone standards. And you can see when they finally have detonated something, you can see that it's cooked off munitions or fuel or something inside this facility. Yep, and you can see that whatever's cooked off is now beginning to burn through the roof as the drone begins to vacate. Now the drone begins its battle damage assessment. But before we take a look at exactly what's in here, I want to take a second to talk about Ukraine's larger strategy, where they've pivoted, right? They've had only marginal gains in this counteroffensive. They've really felt as though Russian forces are well-resourced. And we've known for a long time that Russia has been marshaling its resources, right? Wagner complained about its lack of artillery shells when they were taking Bakhmut, primarily not because Russia was out, but because Russia was preserving its munitions for blocking this Ukrainian counteroffensive, which means that for Ukraine, they need to spend more time focusing on on taking out and disrupting Russian logistics systems. And then, by combining that effort with a steady offensive pace, I think you're going to see much better returns, right? Basically, Ukraine previously was looking to run their Kyiv offensive again, break Russian lines, turn and push and create chaos in the backfield and take territory that way. But it now seems like they're pivoting to the Kherson method, right? You have, remember in Kherson, Ukrainian forces were making slow, steady progress while increasing dramatically the pressure, the logistical pressure on Russian forces. And eventually it became too hard to keep these forces resupplied, and Russia withdrew them across the river. Now, Obviously, there's not such a stark barrier separating these Russian forces from other resupply points, but it still can be an effective strategy. And I think that's what we're seeing Russia or Ukraine do here by using their drones and other standoff weapon systems to target Russian logistics hubs. By doing this, right, they're making it that much harder for the forces at the front line to maintain steady levels of supply and logistics support, right? So the harder these forces have to fight, the more they need. They need medical, food, water, munitions, and the idea is that they are both preventing. It's imagine a backpacker or a hiker. Imagine you have to ride your bike across the country, right? Imagine you're both told to ride faster, but also the food you get every meal is reduced by 50%, right? How long would you be before you were at total exhaustion? It would happen exponentially faster than if you were just riding harder or just eating less. By combining the two, you burn out the enemy much quicker. That's what Ukraine is trying to do with this logistics effort. I actually have a theory, and I have no evidence for this other than sort of my inferences, that when Ukraine launched its efforts backing the Russian militia, it equipped that Russian militia operating in Belgorod with U.S.-made weapons in violation of one of the few terms that the U.S. implemented in when they provided Ukraine aid, right? The U.S. was like, we will aid you. You cannot use our weapons to attack Russian sovereign territory. And Ukraine really violated that. And so I have a theory that perhaps as a sort of, I don't want to say a punishment, but as a consequence, the U.S. may have shared less intelligence and conducted less planning assistance in this offensive effort. So that while they continue to get stuff, right, we've noticed this offensive effort seems to be sort of scattered. It looks like a Soviet-style offensive, right? Offensive being done across the front lines, broadly, without much targeting, and it seems almost like Ukraine doesn't really know where it needs to go, where the enemy is weak. It's sort of just trying to push everywhere at once. And this isn't really a great strategy, as we've seen. Whereas the U.S., with its advanced intelligence, its high-level satellites, its great Russian human intelligence sources, would surely be able to identify for Russia the weakest areas of the front line, and probably would be able to feed it data on where Russian logistics hubs are located. So I suspect that maybe Ukraine has thought to have been, floating on their own enough and has been reminded of just how valuable a partner the U.S. is. That's probably why Ukraine is pivoting away from sort of high-volume offensive operations and is now focused on shaping operations, likely with U.S. assistance probably restored. That's why we're seeing these sort of operations where Russian logistics hubs and depots are being targeted. And you can see the effectiveness, right? This was 2 drones. And we can see when we zoom in here, again, it's clear that this was a Russian, probably repair depot. Here was a tracked vehicle that looked like it was being repaired. In the next bay over was another tracked or a wheeled vehicle that was under repair. So you can see that this whole effort was really very effectively targeted and effectively executed, as each of these clearly one bay after the other cooked off and caused considerable damage. Again, think not only of the fact that these vehicles are out of commission, but there's a lot of munitions that are out of commission, spare parts, and likely important repair tools, all of which would have to be replaced, in addition to the fact that there now needs to be a new logistics hub located. So hopefully this gave you some education and some insight into what exactly Ukraine's thinking and how these sort of operations fit into the whole picture. Of course, guys, if you want to get access to the most up-to-date news from the national security space, you want to check out the Strategic Sitrep. This is my newsletter that I launched in response to the fact that a lot of geopolitics and national security news is just sort of clickbait. They frame things in ways that don't make any sense. They oftentimes remove important context, or they ignore major geopolitical stories. So as you can see here, right, we talk in this week about the escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not just a summary of what has happened most recently, but also the so what, giving you the context needed to understand exactly what we're looking at. We also talk about the French civil unrest and, of course, Ukrainian reports of fierce fighting on all across the front lines. So be sure to check that out at thestrategicsitrep.com/subscribe. Link is in the description or up here. And as always, thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.